What's going on, guys? It is Schmeat back here with another video, and there's been a ton of recommended things to me about the Charlotte Hornets. And I thought I'd react to one of them by Rusty Buckets. A link in the description down below will be toward this video. And I really want to see what they say because it's different hearing from an outsider rather than me, who has been focusing on the Charlotte Hornets for years. And I'm going to be coming out with my own video about what I think is next for the Charlotte Hornets. But I'm curious because besides this year, when have these YouTubers like Rusty Buckets, like the other guy who was recommended to me, I forget his name, when have they watched the Charlotte Hornets in the past? So, and other than like nationally televised games and hearing about how players are doing throughout the year, I'm curious. I'm curious what is perception of what our organization is, who our players really are, is because I'm interested in what an outsider thinks that we should do this offseason. Because obviously Rusty Buckets, I believe he's a Bulls fan, so he hasn't focused on the Hornets like I have, which is understandable. You can't focus on all 30 teams, but it's going to be interesting nonetheless. So let's get right into it. Subscribe to his channel as well. Yeah.
The Charlotte Hornets just lost in the play-in in a really large fashion, which caps off the season with a disappointing end, even though the season as a whole, I would say, is overall a positive. There have certainly been highs and lows, but ultimately the good far outweighs the bad for this team. The addition of Gordon Hayward in free agency, some other smaller moves, and then of course number one is the amazing play by rookie LaMelo Ball. So now the Charlotte Hornets are getting ready to go into the off-season and prepare for the 2021-2022 season. And in today's video, I want to talk about what's next for the Hornets and really more specifically focus on what they should do and how they should navigate this off-season. So let's get into it.
These intros take forever. I feel bad for skipping through, but
going to be playoff content on this channel consistently for until the playoffs are over. So if you're looking for someone to hear their opinion on the playoffs, I suppose, then subscribe to the channel. Also, by the time this video is up, there should hopefully be a new podcast out, so go check that out as well. So first things first, as I said in the intro, the Hornets are going in a good direction, and this season was overall positive. So as a result, by no means is this a massive red flag. By no means should the Hornets front office be panicking or anything like that. And really, there's no major move this team needs to make at the current moment. This is not going to be a crazy video where I suggest they trade for some superstar.
Thank you. That was my first fear while going into this video, was that he was going to make some outlandish move, because you have to realize the Charlotte Hornets have not made big moves throughout the history of their team. So my first fear when reacting to one of these videos they're going to think we're going to do more than we actually are. And it's been a common theme to think that every team can just sign a player and like a superstar, and it's just not that easy. We don't have we have a lot of cap space, but we don't have enough for a really, really good player. So I like to see him start off on that note, because I think the expectations for the Charlotte Hornets, now that they have a bigger media attention, is way up here. And if you've been really following them like I have, you realize that our ownership does not make big moves very often. That Gordon Hayward signing this offseason was an exception. And there's only one of those signings every 3 or 4 years. You saw the Nick Batum. You see we didn't even re-sign Kemba Walker. And then you see the Gordon Hayward. So only a few years, and we sign a player to that much money. So I like him starting out like that.
Anything like that. For the most part, the Hornets can be pretty chill this offseason, but there are some things that are worth addressing. Losing is not a big deal. Of course, it would have been great to see LaMelo in the playoffs, but it's not the end of the world by any means. So let's talk about what this team can do. And really, the way you do that is by addressing the team's biggest weaknesses.
Center.
And for the Hornets, while the offense offense could be better in some respects, I think the most important thing to focus on with this team is the defensive end of the ball. They could stand to have some better defensive depth as well as just overall better defensive personnel, specifically at the center position. The center position has been the weakest spot on the Hornets for a couple of years now, and it really feels like this is the offseason to address it. Not necessarily.
I wouldn't say for a couple of years. There was a 2-year span. Obviously, he doesn't know this because you can only follow the Hornets for so much when we're bad throughout the history. Maybe we were good in the 90s, whatever. But you get what I'm saying. I would say Kemba Walker was worse defensively than Cody Zeller for like a 2-year span. So I wouldn't say all these years have our defensive, like our biggest need defensively as a center, but I do agree that it was very, very prominent this season that we needed a center. And for Bismack Biyombo, I reacted to that article yesterday, or I guess today. It came out today. But I made the video yesterday about how Bismack Biyombo was considered our Defensive Player of the Year by Bleacher Report, and that just says something in and of itself.
Necessarily by landing some star center or drafting some fantastic defensive center or the center period. They don't have to make some bombastic, crazy move, but something better than Cody Zeller and Bismack Biyombo trading the starting spot would be nice. Now, as I said, the offense could be better, but I do want to focus on defense, which might seem confusing because the Hornets this year ranked 18th in defense and 22nd in offense. However, I think the offense is going to be fine with stability and health. LaMelo Ball was not a starter for a good chunk of the year, and Gordon Hayward has dealt with injury. I believe Terry Rozier has even missed some time, and the Charlotte Hornets with LaMelo
and Malik Monk and Miles Bridges, there's no reason why, or there's no surprise that our offense is ranked 22nd or 21st, whatever he said, when you have Cody Martin, Caleb Martin, Jalen McDaniels, all these players who haven't gotten real minutes playing real minutes this season. So that's no surprise to me.
LaMelo Ball as the starting point guard, and with him on the floor, had a 114.9 offensive rating, which is the 10th best offensive rating in the league. So you get some consistency, you get LaMelo the entire year, relative health, and I think their offense is going to be more than fine. More Melo is going to equal better offense, and especially more development from Melo that will come with time, being that he's just 19 years old. Offense is not something that the Hornets are going to struggle with for next season or the foreseeable future. Defense, on the other hand, there's a lot more questions. Being 18th in defense is not that bad. Being a middle-of-the-pack defense can be more than enough in multiple cases. In fact, if the Hornets ended up being a top 10 offense next year and they just remained like the 18th defense in the league, they would solidly be a playoff team. But we can't confidently say they're going to be a top 10 offense just next year, and on top of that, it can always be improved, and when things can be improved, try to improve them. That's generally the way you do things, especially when you're running a basketball organization. There is not terrible defensive personnel on this team across the board. Miles Bridges and PJ Washington are both really good defenders. Terry Rozier is an above average defender, and there are plenty of passable guys, and James Borrego has a relatively good defensive scheme that gets more out of the team than their actual defensive talent. Both Cody Zeller and Bismack Biyombo defensively are fine, but that is really...
I wouldn't say that. I mean, sometimes some games they passed the standard check of, being okay. But the majority of games this season, it's just unbearable. You get one outlier every 20 games where Bismack Biyombo has that 5-block game, and then you're just back to reality, so...
really it. And being that they're not providing anything other than finishing plays offensively, you'd rather have more than just...
And sometimes they don't even do that. They don't even, like Bismack Biyombo cannot catch.
The fine defensive center when you could have a good one, or an offensive center who can do more than just be fine on offense. Also, in the long term, you'd probably prefer a center who's not 30 plus years old. Now, as for actually getting a starting center to replace these guys, the options...
Well, Cody Zeller is 28. I think he was referencing Bismack Biyombo, but Cody Zeller is not in his 30s.
They're not amazing. There's not some center in this year's free agency that's like the clear guy to go to, but there are decent starting caliber center options out there. Nerlens Noel of the New York Knicks has been fantastic, and for that reason they might want to try and re-sign him, and Richaun Holmes would be a big get as well. You could attempt a bidding war on Jarrett Allen, and if you actually manage to win that bidding war, that would...
No, we no. Unless Jarrett Allen just wants to be on a brighter team than the Cavs, I don't see us getting Jarrett Allen. He's asking for $25 million. With that money, if we pay him $25 million a year, I don't see us re-signing Monk or Graham, because then we would have to fill out our roster with more role players who aren't asking for money like that.
Would be huge, because if you get him for like $22 million a year, I think he will be worth that. Thing is, though, I'm pretty sure Cleveland also thinks he's worth that, and they have his restricted free agency rights, so I have my doubts that that's going to happen, and it probably won't. So either Nerlens Noel or Richaun Holmes from free agency. Now, you could also use your draft pick to draft a center, and there are a couple of names at like late lottery that wouldn't be too big of a stretch. But for the most part, I think you'd be better off, especially in the position the team is in right now, to just draft the best player available, and I would sign one of Richaun Holmes or Nerlens Noel. For this specific situation, for what I'm doing my hypothetical roster, I'm going to go Nerlens Noel. Richaun Holmes might honestly be more likely, but I think Nerlens Noel is a good bit better defensively than Richaun Holmes, but worse offensively. But I'm going to go with Nerlens Noel for my hypothetical here. And then you just draft best player available. I don't really know who that is because I'm not a draft.
I like that he has that mindset of because there's not many good centers in this year's draft, so I'd rather just get a proven guy and fill out our bench with a draft pick or two.
Draft guy, so just insert filler best guy available. Also, it's possible they trade that pick for a center, but I couldn't think of a specific trade, so that's also an option.
Miles Turner, just saying.
But I'm not thinking of anything specifically. But now let's say you draft best player available and you're signing Nerlens Noel. Nerlens gets about $10 million a year, and at around the 13th pick in the draft, that rookie will get around $3.5 million a year. Once you have that dealt with, you then have to deal with the free agency of both Devontae Graham and Malik Monk, who are both restricted free agents. Re-signing the both of them with their bird rights, assuming you first get some free agents as well on top of just Nerlens Noel, would result in pretty much going all the way up to the luxury tax, assuming they get the amount of money I think they're going to be worth. And that is a questionable thing. Not necessarily that signing them is bad, but that you have that much money tied into a roster that's not amazing when you might...
The interesting thing about what he's talking about between Monk and Devontae Graham is for the right price. And that's what I've been saying. If it's for the right price, bring him back. And the comments that Malik Monk has said past the blowout against the Pacers have made me realize that maybe Malik Monk and Devontae Graham will take a pay decrease, and they will be team friendly in this offseason. And I didn't really realize that possibility until the comments that I saw after the game, and I was like, okay, they are for the team, and especially Malik Monk. I'm not sure about Devontae Graham, but yeah.
I'd rather just have that cap space available for some free agent down the line. Devontae Graham's free agency is a big area of debate amongst Charlotte Hornets fans because some Hornets fans really like him, some do not, and there is a debate whether he is kind of redundant on the team because there's already plenty of...
I wouldn't say it's about if we like him or don't like him. I think it's if we want to pay him or not pay him. I think everybody likes Devontae Graham. He was an overlooked player coming out of college. He spent 1 year in the G League. He had multiple game winners last season. We really gave him the ropes. He led us to a bunch of wins. He had a great statistical season, not really efficiency-wise, but counting stats-wise. I don't think it's whether or not we like him or not. It's whether he's worth it. As he's going to go on here, he is redundant on this team, knowing we have LaMelo as a starter for years to come. But again, right price, keep him.
playmaking and a decent amount of shooting without him on the team already at the point guard spot and at the guard spots in general, so maybe you don't really need him. But personally, to me, I think having that scoring and playmaking punch off of the bench, he can play with LaMelo and fill LaMelo's role when necessary. I would bring back Devontae Graham for no more than probably $15-16 million a year max, and I don't think he's going to get more than that. Maybe some team comes out of the blue, but I think that's around what his value will be, and I would actually probably let Malik Monk go. Now, Malik Monk...
Okay, Rusty Buckets. Okay, I was gonna hit pause, and then I was like, okay, I'll let him speak. If we want a scoring punch off the bench that's consistent and has a better efficiency, although he's streakier, it's Malik Monk. Like, if we want a guy that can score off the bench, like we should be wanting Malik Monk more than Devontae Graham. But okay.
Monk has been fantastic for the Hornets this year, but just because I'm more worried about this team's defense long term, I would personally rather bring in a defensive 3-and-D guy. As for some of those defensive 3-and-D guys I have in mind, I think you could manage to sign both Otto Porter Jr. and Tony Snell, and Tony Snell is probably going to be the most underrated free agent of this entire free agency class, and I think both of those guys would be better than Malik Monk. I'd say...
Okay, hear me out here. Devontae Graham is worse than Malik Monk in defense. He's smaller, he's older, he costs more than what Malik Monk is going to cost. He's at a position where, we are above average, like really above average at the point guard position. Malik Monk is kind of there's a closer distance between Terry Rozier and Malik Monk than there is to LaMelo Ball and Devontae Graham. That's basically what I'm saying. And although I'd like Otto Porter and Tony Snell, I'd rather have the potential of Malik Monk. I think he's just going back to this upcoming draft class. I think his player comparison is Jalen Green. Just he's already a rookie, or he's already a pro. I don't know about that take from Rusty.
Porter is probably worth like 12-13 mil a year. Tony Snell gets to like 8, maybe even upwards of 10. But I think based on my math, they can afford that in the cap sheet along with Nerlens Noel and that rookie. And then you can bring back Devontae Graham on his bird rights. Also, I'd bring back Bismack Biyombo on pretty close to a minimum contract because...
not close to a minimum. If we're paying anything above the minimum for Bismack, it's an L for the offseason.
On top of the fact that he's a pretty all right backup center, he also is known for being a pretty good locker room presence, so he's worth keeping around.
Didn't he have that fight with LaMelo at the start of the year? But okay.
At that point, your starting lineup would be LaMelo Ball, Terry Rozier, Gordon Hayward, PJ Washington, and Nerlens Noel. And then off of the bench, you'd have Devontae Graham, Tony Snell, Otto Porter Jr., Miles Bridges, and Bismack Biyombo, as well as whoever the best pick available is. As for that best pick, this is really a vague thing, but, maybe they fill in a spot for, like, Tony Snell or Otto or whoever's position he might fill. Maybe it's a center. I don't know. But there's definitely a room in the rotation that could be made there because the rotation isn't chock full of talent. But I don't know what the specific player is, so we'd have to find out when that happens. But this team has much better defensive depth, specifically rim protection and defending the paint. Nerlens Noel is fantastic for that, and having that consistency at the center position, I think, makes a big difference. He's also even a better lob target than any of the guys that they had already. And I think even offensively, they're not really taking a hit because Tony Snell is a fantastic three-point shooter. Can't create as much off of the dribble as Malik Monk, but I think he more than makes up with that with his ability to be consistent from three, as well as be a good defensive player. Otto Porter Jr. is a good three-point shooter and consistently pretty good defensive player. Miles Bridges is a great defensive player off of the bench. Bismack Biyombo, good defensive player.
I mean, Miles Bridges is... I wouldn't call him a great defensive player. I don't know how much you can ask for out of Tony Snell and Otto Porter to be like staples in your backup lineup. Obviously, they'd be more consistent than the Martin twins in the backup roles. And then I think he's forgetting about Jalen McDaniels, who has shown moments this year of being part of the lineup or part of some minutes during the game. He might be just overrating a little bit how good Bismack Biyombo is as a backup even. But okay.
Off of the bench, and just overall your defense gets improved pretty drastically. Now, none of these are major moves. There's nothing crazy happening here, but as I mentioned in the intro, the Hornets are in a pretty good position, and I don't think they need to do anything crazy. For the most part, just ride the wave that's going to come with LaMelo. Do not tie yourself too much into any kind of bad long-term contract, and just see what LaMelo becomes and adjust accordingly. For the most part, I think the Hornets already have a pretty damn solid roster, so you get a year full of LaMelo, a better defense, the better offense that will come with LaMelo being there consistently and improving, and I think you're already a playoff team and set to eventually be a good playoff team as LaMelo Ball further blossoms into the all-star and even superstar caliber player that I believe he can be. But yeah, that's my take on what I think the Hornets.
All right, I think that's the video. Very interesting takes on who he thinks our players are overall. But I haven't even made my video yet, and I'm the Hornets super fan, and he beat me to it. So what can I really say? There's going to be a lot of different scenarios that the Hornets ownership has to go through. I'm not saying they should look to trade Gordon Hayward, but I think that's a possibility, knowing that Miles Bridges, when he had an increase in minutes, that he really made use of it. And Gordon Hayward is injury prone. And so there's a bunch of different factors that play into it, not just signing a good center, which most Hornets fans think that's the end-all, be-all, and that's our only fix that we need to make this offseason. Our bench needs to get improved. He referenced the defense a lot, which I think if we do sign a center, they're automatically better defensively. But yeah, that's the video. See you guys later.